Hi everybody, my name is Nicole Lawson. I am the Artistic Director of Nicole Lawson Dance Projects. And if you're watching from North Carolina, I hope that you're enjoying the wonderful snowy weather. And regardless of where you're tuning in from, I hope that you enjoy this video and I appreciate you tuning in. So thank you again. Again, my name is Nicole. I am the Artistic Director of Nicole Lawson Dance Projects, which I also call NLDP for short. NLDP is a project-based dance company based out of the Piedmont Triad of North Carolina, which for those of you who are not in North Carolina is the Winston-Salem, Greensboro, High Point area of North Carolina. I founded the company in 2018 because I believe that dance can change, can create change. I believe that dance is a tool for building empathy. I believe that dance is a tool for building community, and I believe that dance is a tool for social change. And those beliefs fuel all of the work that I do. This is my first vlog ever. And it's also my first vlog inviting you into the process of Uncivilized Nation. So in a nutshell, Uncivilized Nation is a dance theater work about whiteness, wokeness, and how white people who think they're woke perpetuate racism. And I'm looking at the ways specifically that white people use civil discourse intentionally or unintentionally to perpetuate racism in progressive spaces. So that's the focus of this project. And I didn't want this project just to be something that I presented once or twice and nobody ever looked at it again. I really wanted because this project has been a very personal journey for me, I really wanted you to be able to come along for the ride. So the first part of Uncivilized Nation is a solo called Dirty Laundry. That part is going to be presented in May through Tobacco Road Dance Productions. Thank you so much, TDRP, for helping me make the first part of this work. But this project is much longer than this solo. I'm going to be presenting a full evening length performance of this work, a more in-depth version of this work, and that's not going to be premiering until March of next year. But again, this project is incredibly personal. It's a personal journey for myself, and I know when I bring in my other collaborators to complete the work in March, it's going to be deeply personal for them. And so I want you to come on this ride with me. Because as part of this project, I am taking responsibility for my whiteness. I'm reflecting on my whiteness. I'm being honest with myself and everyone else about the ways that I perpetuated racism. And I want to put that on stage. I want to put on stage what it looks like for a white person to reconcile with the ways that they have participated in a racist system, and what it means to decide you don't want to do that anymore, and what that means to take, in the words of Maria Bowman, to take it back to your community. So the part that's going to be premiering in May will be this look at what does it mean for white people to hold each other accountable? What does it mean for white people to actually practice effective anti-racism? So that's what this project's hoping to show. So every other week between now and the final product, the demonstration of the final project, the presentation of the final product, I don't know, I'm not Vanna White, I'm going to be publishing a blog that's more in-depth and more nerdy for those of you who like to bug out on data and facts like I do. And I'm also going to be producing a blog that's a little more personal and also a little shorter because I'm nerdy and like words and data. My blog's going to be a little long. So the vlogs are hopefully going to be shorter than 10 minutes. This one might go a little longer because it's an introduction. But you'll be getting a blog and a vlog every other week. Now, if you subscribe to my newsletter, you will get the blog sooner. And you'll also get some additional content that I won't be publishing in the blog or the vlog. I don't know, like live sessions where you can ask me whatever you want, but we'll see. So if you want in on that additional content, you have to sign up for my newsletter, and you can do that at NicoleLawsonDance.com. So getting into today's question, why am I making a dance about racism? Or excuse me, why am I talking about racism when I'm making a dance about civil discourse? Well, the simplest answer is because you can't have civil discourse unless you talk about racism. Often when I tell people that this is what I'm working on, and when by people, I mean white people, often when I tell white people what I'm working on, I get asked, don't we talk about race too much? We need to focus on how we're all the same, and isn't that just going to divide the country more than it already is? So let me just go down the line. We don't talk about race enough. Thinking that we're all the same and ignoring the ways that we're different is how we got to 2020 and the state that we're currently in. And the fact that it's divisive is why we need to talk about it. And the fact that racism is divisive is kind of the point. The United States has been divided into a racial caste system from its birth. Racism is codified into our own Constitution. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So you cannot have civil discourse unless you address racism, which is why I'm making a dance about racism. So I want to make 2 points in today's video. The first is addressing an idea that I was raised with, which is that there was some golden era in the United States where people just came together and talked about complicated, controversial issues, and they were resolved and everything was fine. And usually an addendum to that belief is that the U.S. Constitution is set up to be perfect and just, and that if we just trust it, it's going to lead us towards that liberty and justice for all that we're promised. And my bubble has already been bursted, and I'm going to burst yours today. Based on my current understanding of history, now understand that I am 26 years old and I do not have a PhD in history, but based on my own reading of history, civil discourse has never existed in the U.S. My Exhibit A would be the Civil War. My Exhibit B would be slavery. My Exhibit C would be the genocide of Native Americans. And my Exhibit D is that the Founding Fathers were petty as hell. To go off on a little diatribe, often when we talk about civil discourse, we talk about being respectful of each other. And I am convinced that the Founding Fathers were the pettiest group of men I've ever read about, because I've been reading about them a lot this year. Thomas Jefferson nearly caused us to go to war with France because he sabotaged President John Adams while he was vice president by telling the French that he was stupid, which may or may not have been true, but telling the French that he was stupid and convincing them not to do any diplomatic work with him. And when President Adams goes to attempt to do diplomatic work surrounding the conscription of sailors and attack of American ships in the Atlantic, John Adams understandably blew up, and we nearly went to war with France because Thomas Jefferson had a personal grudge against John Adams. So that's just one fun fact. The second fun fact is the beef between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. They hated each other, constantly maligned each other in the press. And we talk about fake news today. The only difference between the fake news we have now and the fake news that existed in the 1780s was the internet. We can spread it around and create it with bots today, but let me tell you, the content was just as salacious in 1789. All I'm saying is look up the, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but the Unholy Pamphlet, which is a pamphlet that Alexander Hamilton wrote trying to get ahead of said fake news when they discovered one of his multiple extramarital affairs and what fell out between he and Thomas Jefferson after that. So this idea that the founding fathers sat around and put aside their differences and just worked together is bullshit. It just is. Excuse my language, Mom, but it's bullshit. So the reason I give those examples is that my understanding of civil discourse and the way it was always taught to me is that in civil discourse, everyone has to be invited to the table and all ideas have to be held as equal as long as those ideas are within reason. And I emphasize the within reason part. And the truth of the matter is that for the vast majority of U.S. history, and today, the majority of people who lived in the United States weren't even allowed in the room where the table was. And I find it questionable that you can have civil discourse, real civil discourse in a country where not all people are truly valued and granted their full human dignity. That's that. So that's my personal reading, and I go through all that stuff about the personal part is because I love U.S. history. I have as long as I can remember. I was raised to be a blue-blooded patriot because I was raised in the evangelical church, and it's God, country, and mama. And I grew up being taught that the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence were Christian doctrine. And it was devastating when I really learned the truth about our nation's founding and its founding principles. So, as everybody's talking about this magical period where we were somehow able to have this mythical state of perfect civil discourse, it has never existed. Full stop. But we can build it. And I'm going to talk about that. That's another vlog. Or just come see the show. Honestly. But I want to talk about now 3 ways that I personally have sabotaged civil discourse in the present. And they're not just these 3 ways of sabotaging civil discourse are not limited to me. They're actually they're the most common ways that white people derail civil discourse in having conversations with Black people and people of color, especially in civil discourse about racism. And so these, I'm talking about these because these, as I've been doing my self-reflection throughout this process, these 3 are the ones that have come up the most for me in terms of the way that I express my racism. So I'm going to talk about them really quickly, and I'm going to talk about them through the lens of my own personal experience. And the first one is privilege. Most white people have no idea how much privilege they have. I absolutely did not. So the working definition of privilege that I'm using is it is a benefit that you are given by your birth into a particular type of characteristic that you did not earn. So I'm going to go back and do that again and make it less confusing. A privilege is something that you are given by society because of a characteristic you have, not because you earned it. So for me, living in a country founded on racism, I have white privilege. You, if you are watching this and you are white, you have white privilege. And of course, white privilege is not the only one that exists. There's male privilege, there's cisgender privilege, there's straight privilege, there's class privilege, there's ability privilege, able-bodied privilege. Like, we could go down the list. Because that's called intersectionality, the idea that you can be privileged in multiple ways and that multiple types of privileges that can exist. But the part I want to draw attention to is that for me to have a privilege, somebody else can't have that privilege. That's how they work, right? And so, excuse me. So the hardest thing for me to overcome has been accepting how much privilege I really do have. And I think usually the reaction, or definitely the reaction that I had to being confronted with my own privilege is, but I've struggled. And the truth is that privilege doesn't mean that you haven't struggled. It doesn't mean that you haven't had to work hard. It doesn't mean that things haven't gone wrong in your life. It just means that you haven't had to deal with the harm from a particular disadvantage. So I'll give you an example. I have bipolar disorder. You know, I do not have, I am not able to speak right now. Let's try that again. I have bipolar disorder. I am non-neurotypical. I do not have neurotypical privilege, right? And having bipolar disorder sucks a lot of the time. Like figuring out what medication to take, figuring out what insurance different psychiatrists take, if they take insurance at all, figuring out where to get my prescriptions filled, dealing with the daily stigma. I mean, if I want to get really personal, I've tried to commit suicide twice. Bipolar disorder for me, especially before I was treated, has been personally very destructive, and it is challenging in my daily life because of symptoms like low impulse control and attention problems and memory problems, right? But it is way easier to be mentally ill, non-neurotypical, if you're a white person. And I go into some different ways in the vlog, in the blog, but the most important thing to me is that because of the color of my skin, my mental health disorder will never be criminalized. If I had a severe manic episode tomorrow and my husband had to call emergency services for me and the police were the first people that showed up, I feel pretty confident that that experience would end in me being taken to the psychiatric ward and not in violence. If you're a Black person living with mental illness, it's a struggle to be taken seriously by the medical profession, for one, because there are so many false beliefs about how mental illness is a white person issue and that Black people are too resilient and strong to have mental health issues. And I am talking about white mental health providers making that statement, because that's still a common belief. It's, if you are having an episode of some kind, you're going to be seen as criminal or dangerous. So the police are going to be called on you and you have the risk of coming to violence. Those stats are available. I can link them to this video if people decide that that's something they want. So yes, I am disadvantaged in a way, but my white privilege shields me from a lot. It has benefited me academically. It has benefited me economically. It definitely benefits me socially, right? So privilege was the hardest pill for me to swallow, because if I don't have an understanding of privilege, I can't hear a Black person or a Black person of color talking about their experience. And if I can't hear the person talking to me, I can't have civil discourse. The second thing that I have struggled with for myself is false objectivity. So this comes from that place of white privilege, that my white privilege means that I am highly visible. My experience as a white woman or as a white person is centered in the plots of movies, books, and television shows. Um, Most of my teachers in school were white. Most of the people in the community I grew up with were white. All of my pastors ever have been white. Every mental health professional I've ever met with, except for one, has been white. Um, let's see, what else? I've never had a black principal. All my principals in school were white. I think all of my teachers throughout my schooling have been white, but one, I may have already said that one before. When I look on the news, most of the news anchors look like me. 80%, most of Congress, most of our government, period, state, local, or federal, looks like me. So that privilege leads me to believe that my existence is the standard existence. And that's wrong. Because what happens is when I think that my experience is the standard, I judge everybody else's experience based on mine. And if it doesn't line up, then I reject their experience out of hand as being invalid, or they're overreacting, or they're reading the situation wrong. And I have entered into conversations with my own husband with that mindset. In the vlog, I talk about our different experiences growing up with the police and not believing him about the negative experiences that he'd had with the police, because I've never had that interaction with the police. And we couldn't have conversations, because you can't come at a conversation believing that your standard precludes anybody else's experiences, right? You can't have an honest conversation with somebody if you think that they're not seeing the situation clearly, which in most cases they are. Because if a person of color, a black person or a person of color, tells you that a certain situation is racist, you should believe them, because they're probably right. They're the only arbiter of what is racist, right? So that's been a personal issue with me, and a personal issue for me to overcome, is decentralizing myself and my experience as a white person from the way that I look at the world. I constantly have to ask myself, it's like, well, am I reacting to it this way? Am I reacting to what this person is saying from my whiteness? Or am I reacting from a place of empathy? Because I can't choose both. I have to choose one or the other. I can be white or I can be empathetic. So that's a question that I have to ask myself all the time. And then the last one is colorblind ideology. I was raised in a home where we do not see color. We treat people equally. I remember looking at people and telling them that I don't see color, right? In conversations about racism. Super helpful, right? Because as someone put it to me, if you don't see color, you don't see me. Because again, to that idea about how we need to focus on our similarities. Yes. Going back to the example of my husband and I have very similar interests. We fell in love initially because we both love to talk about and debate politics. But we've both had dramatically different experiences in our lives, because I am white from a native-born family, and my husband is Latinx from an immigrant family, and he's just had a very different experience in life than I have. And if I ignore that, I can't even love him the way that he's supposed to be loved. I can't understand him in the way that he needs to be understood. It's selfish to ignore the ways that he's different from me in that regard. And if that's true in the relationship that I have with my husband, that's true across the board. That's true at the societal level. If we as white people can't see the experiences, can't see or ignore the experiences of the people of color, the Black people, Latinx people, Asian people, Native American people around us, we can't engage with them, let alone do anti-racist work, because we don't see the racism we're supposed to be dismantling. I'm also going to put an aside there that if you are a white person, especially a white woman, dating a person of color, that does not prevent you from being racist. I will be sharing more stories about myself being in an interracial relationship where I very much continued to do and say things that were really racist. I am going to be talking about that. It's coming. I just wanted to add that in. So you can read more. This video has ended up being a little longer than I wanted to be because it's an introductory video. So thank you for hanging on for the ride. But these are 3 things that I found myself struggling with. A lot of white people struggle with this in terms of how to have civil discourse and practice anti-racism. And I wanted to share them with you and be honest. And I'm going to continue sharing them with you and being honest, because it's only by being honest about the ways that we've been racist, we are racist, and that if we don't pay attention to what we're doing, we're still going to be racist. We can't change, and we can't do the work of dismantling the systems that kill people, honestly, in our country. And so I just wanted to be real and vulnerable with you about my own experiences, and I'm going to continue to be that way. And if you don't think I am being honest, please tell me. I ask you to call me out, because you should, if you feel that I'm not being honest. So again, this is my first vlog. I will keep you updated on the trajectory of the show. And I will update you when the next vlog is going to come out. And I just want to say an incredibly heartfelt thank you for supporting me and supporting this project. So sign up for the newsletter if you want that additional context, the additional content and context. I also hope that you will sign up to be interviewed for the project or take a survey. You can do that at NicoleLawsonDance.com/uncivilized-nation, or just go to the website. There's a tab. I hope, and if you feel very strongly about this work and want to make a particularly special contribution, I invite you to make a donation, because getting this project to where I need it to be is going to require a lot of money, and it's especially going to require me to be able to pay people to help me make this work, because paying people is the most important thing to me anytime that I'm making artistic work. So if you feel very strongly about this work, I hope that you'll take a survey, sign up to be interviewed, or make a donation. You can do that at my website. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for sticking around for this long video. I promise the rest of them will not be this long. Respect to everybody. I'll see you soon.